Okay. So I think it started recording, and let's begin. So hi everyone, and I hope you're having a good day. Wait, no, sorry. Hi everyone, I hope you're having a good day, and thank you all for coming. Today we have a very special webinar, especially because it's one of our faculty members. So today we'll start off the webinar of the semester with Dr. Farzana, where she will be speaking about the sounds of survival, music, and religious practices in Rohingya refugee life in Malaysia. So I wholeheartedly believe that this webinar is going to be extremely informative and well-researched, as Dr. Farzana has dedicated a large portion of her career specializing in this research. So without further ado, Dr. Farzana, you may take the stage.
Okay. Thank you very much, Riman, for this introduction. So, distinguished guests, respected colleagues, dear friends, dear students, Assalamu alaikum, and very good day to all of you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. This is really an opportunity for me to share my current research. The data for this socio-ethnographic research comes from my fieldwork conducted in Malaysia from March 2019 until August 2020. So 1 year and 5 months time as part of a much larger study. It was a study on Rohingya's journey of violence and resilience in Malaysia. In today's presentation, I will be presenting only a fraction of it because I'll be focusing on resistance and resilience of this ethnic minority community from Myanmar. Well, when it comes to the Rohingya refugees and Myanmar, it's nothing new. All of the audience here, to some extent, have some idea. They are familiar with this term because the name of Rohingya refugees often comes on news, and particularly in current time, we have been hearing the military coup recently took place in early February in Myanmar. So allow me to start. I will be talking about the sounds of survival of this particular community. You know that this ethnic minority from Myanmar, the Rohingya refugees, they are scattered in many different parts in South Asia and Southeast Asia. So Malaysia is one of such destinations. And when it comes to the size of these Myanmar refugees in Malaysia, Malaysia is having a sizable Rohingya population. They came to Malaysia in waves, with the highest number of arrivals in the 80s, 90s, 1994, 2000 to 2004, 2012, 2015, and recently 2017, and they continue to come until today. So if we look at the if we look at the refugees from Myanmar to Malaysia, their total number would be 177,000 plus registered refugees and asylum seekers from Myanmar. They are documented refugees, so they have UNHCR card. Out of these 177,000, 100,000 plus are registered Rohingya refugees. So, what it tells is that the biggest number of Myanmar refugees are from the Rakhine state of Myanmar. They are the Rohingya refugees, but there are other ethnic minorities from Myanmar as well, because Myanmar has problem with these ethnic minorities. It has been a long civil war when it comes to Myanmar and state relations with ethnic minorities. So out of all these ethnic minorities, the Rohingyas are the biggest number, 100,000 plus registered. There is also an estimated 30 to 40,000 undocumented Rohingya refugees. They are not registered yet with UNHCR. So So these numbers, these statistics indicates that Malaysia is one of such destination for the Rohingya refugees, and they came to Malaysia mostly by boat or via land routes, as you can see on the map. And when they took their desperate journey by rickety boats, they were unsure of the destination that sometimes took them to neighboring Bangladesh and other time brought them to the shore of Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand. This particular community was relatively unknown to Malaysian citizen, to Malaysian society, due to the invisibility imposed on them by the authorities until recently, until 2015, when this Malaysian uh, when this Southeast Asian boat people crisis and the discovery of 139 mass graves of Rohingya victims in 28 suspected human trafficking camps on the Malaysia-Thailand border were reported in 2015. So since then onwards, media highlighting the case of the Rohingyas in Malaysia, and they live throughout the peninsula of Malaysia. Unlike other countries, unlike Bangladesh, this refugee community in Malaysia are not restricted to refugee camps. They are scattered among the local population, and that also keeps them kind of invisible. So let's move on. So in this paper, our objective is to focus on refugees' adaptation and resilience. And we looked into the non-conventional aspects of refugee life in Malaysia to understand such adaptation and resilience. Why featuring non-conventional aspects of refugee life? First and foremost, if we look at the existing literature on the Rohingya refugees, mostly focusing on Myanmar or Bangladesh. So if you see the existing literature, you would find that either it is focusing on Myanmar, covering its historical, socio-political, and human rights issues, or it's very much focused on aspects of refugee life in camps in Bangladesh. Very little focus when it comes to Rohingyas' exile life in Malaysia. And particularly these non-conventional aspects of refugee life is non-existent. You would not find any serious academic work when it comes to refugees' cultural life, refugees' cultural production and things like that. So by non-conventional aspects, I mean aspects that have been understudied and underrepresented in academic literature, yet can constitute very resourceful archives to understand refugees' lives, strategies, and everyday identity making. So our data for this socioethnographic research comes from 4 different states of Malaysia, particularly Perlis and Kedah. Perlis and Kedah has border with Thailand, and that is why we picked this area, because this is the land route. Mostly refugees, Rohingyas, would come through Thailand to enter into Malaysia. Another big group of Rohingya refugees are located in Pulau Pinang, is the island Penang, and also in the capital city, Selangor and Kuala Lumpur area. So we covered a number of places, but from these 4 different states of Malaysia over a period of 1 year and 5 months. Okay, 1 year and 5 months. In terms of our fieldwork data, we collected 60 respondents, 38 males and 22 females of Rohingya refugees in Malaysia, documented as well as undocumented. When it comes to local Malaysians, we also did talk to 40 local Malaysians. That includes the major ethnic groups in Malaysia: Malay, Chinese, and Indian. A number of researchers, student researchers, did work with me during this time. They helped me tremendously throughout that period of collecting data. So in terms of tools, we used in-depth interviews, and we also had group discussion. Sometimes group discussion with the females, sometimes group discussion with families, and also sometimes with the male refugees. Other than focus group discussion, we also used our observation. We collected textual and non-textual sources such as life stories, musical lyrics, photographs, and also recorded signs and symbols. So to talk about the national attitude towards the Rohingya refugees, the Malaysian national attitude towards this community. First and foremost, we need to understand that Malaysia is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention, 1951 Refugee Convention or its protocol. Malaysia is not a signatory. So officially, the country is not bound to support, bound to follow any legal things. But the country, Malaysia, has been very tolerant when it comes to refugees. It has been giving shelter to Rohingya refugees since 1980s. And there are also other ethnic, other refugees from other countries as well. But if we look at the government policies in legal framework, there is no legal framework or protection mechanism in Malaysia to deal with the refugees. So refugees are not allowed to stay long, so they do not have the permission, long-term permission. And documented refugees are not documented migrants, okay? So under the Immigration Act, Malaysian Immigration Act, all the refugees are considered as illegal and prohibited. So they are illegal immigrants and prohibited. So this status leads to lots of discrimination, and refugees often face harassment, detention, and deportation. So within this, the Rohingya refugees are even more marginalized because of their stateless identity. Other refugees, other Myanmar ethnic minorities, they are at least Myanmar citizens. But in the case of Rohingya refugees, as you may know, their citizenship was taken away through constitutional changes. So 1982, the government, the military government, changed the constitution in a way that it made the Rohingyas as stateless within their own country. So as the Rohingya community do not have a chance to return or repatriate, they are the most vulnerable and marginalized refugee community in Malaysia. If we look at Malaysian government's previous efforts so far to deal with the refugees, it's not really so many, although the country has been very vocal. Recently, we have seen the previous prime minister and the prime minister before him, they were quite vocal. They were talking about condemning Myanmar for its action, brutal action against the Rohingyas, particularly in the General Assembly, UN General Assembly. Although they have been very vocal out of these Southeast Asian countries, but when it comes to taking policies, coming up with framework to deal with the refugees, we do not see many attempts. So to highlight their government attempts, I can only highlight two. One was in 2006, a temporary resident permit to be granted for the Rohingya refugees. This decision was coming up, but it was halted after 17 days for unknown reason. In 2013, the Ministry of Home Affairs in cooperation with UNHCR and immigration, they announced that the government would issue work permit to refugees, but it was also halted. The only development we can see in 2016, the Ministry of Home Affairs announced a pilot project, a small project for 300 Rohingya registered refugees to work in the plantation and manufacturing sectors. But the project was a failed project because very less number of Rohingya refugees actually took up that opportunity. There are a number of things related to it. The policies did not actually was friendly for the refugees. It was mostly directed to male refugees. So male refugees had to leave their families. It's a new country for them, and when they are with their family, they had to leave behind their wife and children and go to those plantation and manufacturing areas and live there to work for the plantation. So these sort of things did not work out. Payment was not good, food and other things were not good. Refugees complained later on. So ultimately that project was not successful. Other than this, we do not see any major activities or projects taken by the Malaysian government. From our data, the host communities' perception about the refugees, as I mentioned that we talked to 40 local Malaysians. Our respondents, 29 out of 40, they believe the Rohingya refugees are in Malaysia to find shelter. They are the survivors of genocide. They are in Malaysia to shelter. Yet a significant number of respondents, 19 out of 40, they believe that these refugees are economic migrant workers. So they were unable to differentiate economic migrant workers from refugees. So they thought they are here to gain in terms of economic aspects. 60% of local respondents appear to hold negative perception about the Rohingya refugees. Lots of negative perception. You know that when it comes to refugees, there are lots of prejudice and lots of negative things attached to the concept of refugees most of the time. So those things are also there. Although 22%, 9 respondents indicate that refugees are also contributing to the society by working in the informal sectors. So I would not go details about these things. If you ask, I will explain it later on, but time would not permit. I need to focus on the cultural aspects most. So allow me to move on. So how is life for the Rohingya refugees in Malaysia? Do they feel safe, and why not? These sort of questions we imposed or asked the refugees. And we cannot generalize. It's a big group, right? So when it comes to Rohingya refugees, only a very small number of them, particularly those who came to Malaysia decades earlier, they are relatively in better situation. I can share 1 or 2 exceptions that we found during our fieldwork, but majority of these refugees continue to live in precarious situation in Malaysia. If I can share some of the narratives, some of the quotations from the refugees often mention that they do not have any respect, no respect for Rohingya in Malaysia. They have restrictions, particularly they cannot find work, and it's very difficult to earn and support families because there is no work permit per se. So they suffer quite a lot, and there are also groups that are always chasing the refugees to extract money from them. So refugees complain that they suffer all the time. They fear that police will detain them. When it comes to detention, it becomes like a culture that the police will detain them and will release them after getting certain amount of money. It happens very frequently. So if you talk to the male refugees, you would find that most of the male refugees do have experience of being detained or going to jail for no reason sometimes. So police refugees shared that police and immigration officers search for us, and also children do not get education. And also when it comes to health facilities, that's also very limited, only with UNHCR card. They used to get some access, but without UNHCR card, no access to public hospital. That particular facility also got very much restricted, particularly during this COVID time. So what this means is that the Rohingya refugees suffer, their sufferings and their challenges did not end in their exile life in Malaysia. They have suffered a lot in Myanmar, and that is why they are the Myanmar's unwanted children. They are the survivors of genocide, and when they move to other countries, take refuge in their exile life, they continue to suffer, they continue to face challenges. It's not only challenges from government side towards the refugees, there are different levels when it comes to challenges. Rohingya community is quite big. They also have different organizations, and these organizations are not really very united. Out of many organizations, mostly they are located in Kuala Lumpur, only 2 are registered or 2 are approved by the UNHCR. So the Rohingya Society in Malaysia, RSM, and WRDN, Rohingya Women Development Network, these are the 2 organizations. They are approved by the UNHCR. Other organizations are not, and sometimes they are not very united. They fight for their survivals, and sometimes the so-called leaders say things that affect their whole community. Sometimes there are unfounded allegations against Rohingya community that create outrage on Malaysian social media. We have seen that during the COVID time, and the social media actually, it spread hate speech against the Rohingya community. And Human Rights Watch had to issue a joint letter to the Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin to end violent threats and anti-Rohingya campaign in Malaysia. So it went to that extent. So now the question is, how are these people coping with all these different level of challenges? As I mentioned, that to understand that, we need to pay attention to their cultural life, to their practices. And we can do this if we pay attention on non-conventional aspects of their life. Is this the first time we are looking at non-conventional aspects of refugees? No, it's not. There are other scholars who have also focused on informal forms of resistance. For example, Michael Addis focused on the role of avoidance protest. However, when it comes to Michael Addis, he believed that when they are in the protest, in resistance, both the parties need to understand that this is happening. They have to be aware of it. On the other hand, Benedict Cargill, he disagreed with Addis, and in his study on everyday resistance to injustice in the case in Philippines village, Benedict believed that not always this resistance has to be very collective way, and not always it needs, both the parties need to be very aware that this is something happening. We also have seen James Scott's work. James Scott's phenomenal work on weapons of the weak, where he emphasized on passive resistance instead of direct confrontation. And weak people often use such weapons to resist in their everyday life. So, so I would like to use these non-conventional forms to understand Rohingya refugees' everyday resistance in Malaysia. If I look at their practices, their religion plays a very important role when it comes to uh, uh, um, their everyday life, everyday cultural life. So the centrality of Islamic sound in Rohingyas' everyday cultural life, as a displaced community, the Rohingyas maintain a deep spiritual life. It is expressed in various ways through their religious practices, notably through their attachment to various religious sounds. These sounds include paying attention to the call for prayer or azan, recitation of Quran, paying attention to the meaning of what they are reciting, listening to Islamic lecture, commonly known as words. And I have a picture from YouTube, and this one is quite popular. And the refugees do share this sort of things in social media, and they take it from internet sources. So the Rohingyas, they follow such rituals. So they express their faith, shahada, and prayers, salat, and also observe fasting. The majority of our respondents highlighted that life in Malaysia does not allow much time, as they are mostly busy with survival activities to feed and support their families. But within this, the little time they have, they try not to miss their 5 daily prayers. They also make sure to attend the Friday Juma prayer and read Quran. As expressed by a Rohingya refugee named Muhammad Siddiq, he's 52. He mentioned that, I'm quoting Muhammad Siddiq here, it's a pseudonym, of course. This is what Muhammad said: when I recite Quran, particularly a chapter like Al-Alaq, I find inner peace. I know that one day we, the Rohingya, will get justice. Why Muhammad Siddiq finds inner peace by reciting this chapter of the Quran is understandable, because the chapter Al-Alaq in the Quran, particularly verses 9 to 15, read, quote, "Did you see the tyrant preventing my servant from praying? Doesn't he know that I am watching? If he doesn't stop, he will be punished," unquote. Here by tyrant, the text refers to Abu Zahal, one of the leaders of Makkah, who led the persecution of the early Muslims. In these verses, God is threatening them to stop, or in the end, they will be punished severely. Similarly, the Rohingya believe that they put their trust in Allah, who is aware of their situation and knows the cruelty of those who have shattered their lives. So the recitation of Quran serves to soothe the hearts of the refugees as they put their trust in a divine higher power. It works for them as a source of emotional, spiritual, and socio-political empowerment. By reciting such verses, their belief becomes stronger, that those who persecute them will finally be punished, and God is ultimately on their side. Therefore, we argue that this attachment to God plays an important role in Rohingya refugees' cultural life as part of their coping strategies in Malaysia. Now I will take you to some of the traditional songs. The spiritual life of Rohingyas is also reflected in their production of songs called taranas. They call it tarana, which create sounds of displacement, indicating their memories of the past, and maintain such memories in their oral tradition to keep their history alive in the present. What this act of singing does is that it reflects their memories of the past, creates bondage with their fellow refugees, and makes sense of the present. If we look at the themes of the Taranas, it often revolves around devotion to religion, claiming belongingness and territorial authority, and things like that. Although these taranas are not composed in order to confront the power of the authorities, if we pay attention to such text, it is not really very difficult to understand that they represent the voice of the oppressed, and it actually expressing certain type of resistance. So I want you to see this tarana, the battlefield of Karbala. And I have highlighted few lines here. This song was composed by Nazimuddin. In this song, he is comparing the condition of Arakan, his land, which is today we call the Rakhine state. So he's comparing the condition of Arakan or the Rakhine state with the famous battlefield of Karbala in Iraq, where Imam Hassan, the son of Imam Ali, grandson of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was brutally killed in 680 CE. Many of his relatives and companions were killed in this battle, and the surviving family members were taken as prisoners. In this case, Nazimuddin refers to Karbala to indicate Hussein's suffering and death as a symbol of sacrifice in the struggle for right against wrong, and for justice and truth against injustice and falsehood. By comparing the situation in Arakan with the battlefield of Karbala, he provides a sense of heroism to those who died in Arakan, framing them as martyrs, as you can see in the song. Moreover, the song articulated resentment against the Myanmar authorities and leadership. You can see Aung San Suu Kyi's name has been mentioned in the song. So, so this leadership allowed and participated in such heinous killing, challenging the oppressors, heinous killing. So through this song, they are challenging the oppressors whom they cannot confront directly. The last portion of this song indicates the inability to find a safe place to live in their own country, and that is why they had to spend a life crying in a foreign land. I'm quoting from the song, keeping the Holy Quran on their chest, unquote. So it is in this religious engagement and in religious songs like this tarana, that the refugees finds their shelter. So I will take you to the next song. This song indicates passion and belonging to the homeland that was built with, quote from the song, with sweat and love. It provides the reasons why they had to leave the home and now have to die in other people's country, where they encounter multiple challenges and marginalization. This is also indicative of the host country that remains as a foreign land to the refugees, despite living for many years. Another important dimension of this song is that it sounds almost like a prayer. When Hashimullah was singing this song, it was so emotional, and his sincerity, his request to the God was there, and as he highlighted in his song by saying that, "Oh Allah, give us our country back." And he's also, through this song, he's also asking for faith in him, iman, before embracing death. So the emotional, spiritual, and submissive tendency towards God makes the song serves in twofold for the singer. It complains about those injustices in life, therefore it is a resistance. And at the same time, it brings them closer to the God and find refuge in its power, from where everything comes and to where everything returns. So when I asked Hashimullah, how do you feel after singing the song? This is what he mentioned. I will try to play the song for 2 minutes for you. Let's see how it goes. So allow me to stop here. Time is pressing. So when I asked him how he felt while singing the song, Hashimullah wiped his tears and said, I wanted to embrace the Tarana. Momentarily, I did not exist here. I felt the wind in my country as if I'm breathing it again. Every time I close my eyes, the image of my homeland, my village, my relatives still haunt me. So this is my last slide. I would like to highlight some of the main findings from this research. So in a way, these taranas offer an experience to the listener, those who are paying attention, by producing an alternative point of view. You know, we often hear what Myanmar government's version about these refugees, telling them that they are stateless, they actually came from Bangladesh and things like that. And also, we also hear from Malaysian government's perspective by identifying this community as illegal Burmese immigrant identity. As opposed to this government version, we see an alternative point of view if we pay attention to their cultural practices and to their cultural traditional songs called Tarana. So by bringing this alternative view is our contribution. This oral transmission of feeling, sentiment, and emotion is an effective means of displaying resistance, particularly in a situation when the people are weak, when they cannot directly confront the oppressor. Another important point would be that there is abundant literature on how diasporic groups are keen to preserve their tradition and cultural practices. But when it comes to the Rohingya refugees, particularly in the case of Malaysia, there is non-existent, as I mentioned earlier. So this paper would contribute to this literature. It argues that the Rohingyas in Malaysia, they rely heavily on maintaining their cultural and religious life
Farzana,
as
sorry,
source of identity.
we lost the voice.
Really?
Professor, we can hear her, I think.
So maybe, is it okay now?
It's okay.
Okay, good. Okay, so all right, thank you. as I was saying that one of our contribution would be to contribute to this literature by bringing this cultural and religious life of the refugees. And what is interesting is that to notice that religion has often been associated by many as a source of violence for the refugees and oppressed minorities. However, in the case of Rohingya, it's quite opposite. Religion did not make them violent, rather it helps them bearing with their life and difficulties. So that is another findings and main argument in our paper. Thank you very much for your attention. I believe I managed it within 40 minutes. Did I take more? I don't know. So I'm happy to respond to your questions and queries.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me, Professor?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
so good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank you, Professor Farzana, for this webinar. It's a really important topic. And so, yeah, thank you for that. And so now, guys, we will move to the Q&A session. So if you have any questions, if you want to say anything, you can just like raise your hand and you can say it, inshallah. If no one wants to ask now, I just have a question. I'll start, Professor.
I think there is one hand. Riman would like to say something.
No, yeah, now Dr. Mitwakil. So Dr. Mitwakil, okay, just a second. Go ahead, please, Professor. Dr. Mitwakil, you can speak now, but your mic is muted, so you can just like open your mic and speak, please. So until Dr. Mitwakil fixes the issue he has, I just want to ask a question, Professor. So you said that there is 30,000 to 40,000 refugees that are unregistered or undocumented. So these 30,000 to 40,000 refugees, are they in the process of to be like documented or registered soon? Or they're just like not in this process and they will just leave soon from Malaysia and go back to or they will be maybe kicked out because they're undocumented. So are they in this process to be documented?
Okay, so thank you, Salim, for your first question. Yeah, when it comes to these undocumented refugees, some of them are asylum seekers, meaning that they are in the process, they applied, but there are also some who were rejected in their application. So after rejection, it's much more uncertain for them because they were once rejected. And so those undocumented group whose asylum process was rejected, they would be feeling, they are most of the time feeling very much not secured in Malaysia. And they are looking forward to get another chance when they can apply. There is also certain group of Rohingya refugees who are undocumented, who prefer to remain undocumented because they don't have the means sometimes to go to the capital city and visit UNHCR office and apply. They do not have the courage to travel if they have landed to the northern part of Malaysia. So sometimes they prefer to just remain within the local community. If they find local community treating them well, they just live an undocumented life. But definitely undocumented or unregistered refugees are much more vulnerable because they do not have a place to return. For example, if it is a registered refugee, fall into a trap, fall into a detention center, they can seek help from UNHCR. But for an undocumented refugee, it takes longer time because UNHCR would be responsible for those who are registered. But at the same time, registered refugees are not registered migrants. So they often face different sort of challenges when it comes to working for the local community. Salim, hope I answered your question.
Yes.
There
Yes, Professor.
was one hand from Riman. Maybe Riman has something to ask.
Yeah, it was more of a like a statement that I don't know if you can add on or not, but and like I think it's very important that we learn about like the individual experiences of each like community that experienced marginalization and was like forced to flee their original homeland. And like for example, we studied refugees and displacement in in our courses, and we learned a lot about refugees. But I think the like no matter how progressive that course is and how helpful it is, we sort of get the impression that all of these refugees experience the same trauma, but like when you learn about each individual refugee experience or each different like minority group, it like you realize that there's a lot of differences and a lot of change, like a lot of different experiences that they go through depending on their like background and what was the reason that they were like forced to flee. So I really want to thank you for this. It was very helpful.
Thank you very much, Riman. I think it's really very important. In fact, this is something we have been highlighting in our refugee class quite often, that not all refugees can be put in one box. Their experiences are different, and we have a lot to learn from different refugee communities, and even from one particular community. Different refugee would perceive their journey, perceive their life in exile differently. Gender perspective is something we were discussing in today's class, where we discussed that how female refugees experience their journey and experience their exile life quite differently as compared to their male partners, how secure they feel. There are certain things very specific to female refugees, being a mother, for example, being having a role change in an exile life. Previously, maybe it was the husband who was a breadwinner, but that sometimes this exile life bring more opportunities, and female need to work, and they need to do double things for their family and also for earning. So that role change also comes with lots of challenges, because partners not necessarily all the time would be supporting them. Young refugees, young mother, they experience the situation differently. So what sort of things they do to cope with such situation is very, very important. We have been constantly highlighting these things in our classes. So that is something I was telling this morning to my students, that please join this class, because this webinar can be a complement to what we are discussing this morning. So thank you, Riman. I appreciate that.
All right, Professor. So now we will move to Dr. Chai.
Hi, Dr. Kazi. Thanks for the great research and presentation, and it's very informative and insightful. Can you hear me, right?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, so,
yes, thank you.
So you mentioned that in your presentation that, yes, there's no legal framework in Malaysia who can accommodate legally and formally of those refugees. Actually, not only Rohingya refugees, I think there's some refugees from other countries, including from China, actually. It's become a big controversy a few years ago when Malaysia government tried to set back some Chinese Uyghur refugees, So there's so I was wondering, this is more not like a question, it's more like an inquiry. What the two levels, like because these Rohingya refugees are more like transnational refugee groups and people. Is there any regional organizations or transnational organizations, whether intergovernmental or non-government, like international non-government organizations, like ASEAN or ORC, or other maybe there's other regional faith-based or ethnic-based groups or organizations which can pressure the international community, pressure the Myanmar government, pressure the host country to do more to help to relieve the suffering of these people, their experience. This is like more like a at the higher level. On the other side, like the macro level, I think you already talked about how they respond and being resilient, how to go through this process. But still, as a individuals and as a humanitarian perspective, is there anything local community, local Malaysians, local or like a South Asian social groups, civil society can do to help? Yeah, I know this might be a very general question, but I'll see if have you found something promising sign during your research? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chai. These are very good input from your side that I can say something, and maybe I can reflect it in my paper as well. To talk about the legal framework, as you have pointed out, that there is no legal framework, and I mentioned it in my presentation, but in different refugee groups, there are a number of different refugee groups, refugees from Palestine, refugees from Syria, and also you mentioned China. Malaysian government approach to different refugee group has been quite different, to be honest here. Not all refugees are treated in a similar way. For example, the Syrian refugees are allowed to get education. Some of the Syrian refugees and Palestinian refugees would be encouraged to go to Malaysian universities. So they will be given sometimes a scholarship, and you would see in different places Malaysian post office or offices like this where they collect donation for Palestinian refugees. So government has a very soft corner when it comes to Palestinian refugees and Syrian refugees. We also have heard government saying local Malaysians to marry Syrian refugees if that is viable. So that sort of encouragement also came from the government to accommodate different refugees. Chinese refugees are also allowed to have education, but this is something we do not see when it comes to Rohingya refugees. So when it comes to treating refugees, government has different approach, unfortunately, for different refugees. Why this is so? One of the reasons could be that these Rohingya refugees do not have any place to return. They do not Myanmar would not be taking them anytime soon. So these are kind of like a burden and permanent thing. Whether this is also linked to some sort of prejudice because of refugees, sorry to say, maybe skin color. Other refugees like Palestinian refugees and Syrian refugees are there could be something like this as well, which officially would never come up. But we see that treatment to different refugees have been different. To talk about whether organizations like ASEAN or OIC can actually put pressure, we very much would like to see that ASEAN would do something about this genocide. This is a different type of genocide. It has been going on for decades. It's a slow genocide that is taking place in Myanmar. UNHCR mentioned that it's a genocide. Human Rights Watch highlighted the case of Myanmar as a genocide against the Rohingyas, but we do not see ASEAN is taking an important role in this. ASEAN's policy so far has been to avoid things and not to interrupt in other countries' internal matters, although in no way this is an internal matter for Myanmar. This is no way is an internal matter. It is very much international. And the Rohingya diaspora is spread around all through South Asia, particularly in South Asia, Bangladesh and India, in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Malaysia and Indonesia, at least we can highlight. And the diaspora is also scattered in other part of the world, in Middle East, and also some very little in the US and Canada. When it comes to putting pressure, recently Gambia, one African countries, brought the case to UN court, ICJ, International Court of Justice, and we hope that they will put more pressure on Myanmar. But unfortunately, another tragedy happened in Myanmar after trying nearly 10 years working on democracy. The country fall into the military rule again. The military regained power in February this year. So how much pressure these organizations can make, as you can see, is quite difficult. We do not have many means to create pressure when it comes to Myanmar. So one of the way would be by putting sanctions. I believe things like this are done by US recently. They have frozen 1 billion Myanmar money currency in the US. Also, New Zealand put sanction on Myanmar. So more countries need to put economic pressure so that the military can feel that economically they are isolated. The military must have calculated before taking this action of suppressing the Democratic Party and putting house arrest to Aung San Suu Kyi, because they have on their side China and Russia. These two countries are not allowing UN resolution to go pass through and take any action by UN. So it's very highly unlikely that organizations would take very big action, but UN should continue to try, and also more countries individually, particularly those who are, who are into the economic business with Myanmar, particularly with the military junta. They need to cut off their they need to cut off their dollars to send to Myanmar to support this brutal regime. And your third point was about the local Malaysians. It is the local Malaysian population, their sympathy and their support. It keeps the refugees going in many different cases. When a newcomer comes, the country doesn't want to accept them. There are times when Malaysian Navy forced those boats into the sea, but in case it reached to any village, for example, the one was in Parlis, my research team visited there and we found that it was the local community who gave the food and clothing at the very beginning, before the police and the detention centers authorities came and took them to detention center. And once they are taken to the detention center, local people, researchers have no access to it. So I would say that although there are lots of negativity, particularly during COVID time, lots of negativity was clearly visible on social media. End of the day is the local community, their support, their sympathy keeps the people going. Any other questions? I hope I addressed your points.
Yes.
Farzana, sorry, Salim,
Yes.
but Dr. Shimal has two questions written on the chat box. So can you just attend to that, please?
Yes, I was about to read them just now. Yes.
Okay.
So the first question from Dr. Shimal, it's about the tension between the Rohingya refugees and the Malaysian locals. So is there any socioeconomic groups that resist or reject or resist, let's say, their presence more than more than the others?
Okay. So yes, we have seen lots of resistance recently, particularly during COVID time. Our fieldwork was actually done before, the major part of the fieldwork was done before COVID time. But we also have noticed, because we are in touch with the refugees, we were constantly updated about their situation. So we have seen that local population they have some negative approach towards the Rohingya refugees, particularly thinking that they are taking their jobs away. Although not many locals would be interested to work in informal sectors like cleaning and dirty the dirty jobs, all those things, cleaning and things. So locals, first of all, they are not really very interested. These are the jobs usually taken by the foreign workers, and when the employers are giving this job to the refugees, they actually can hire refugees in much more cheaper price than hiring other workers, other migrant workers, because refugees do not have other means. If they get any job, sometimes they are even working freely without any job, hoping that in future they will allow him to work for them. So lots of exploitation takes place, and the local community, some of this local community, particularly those who are not doing very well, they often blame that the Rohingya refugees or those who came from outside are taking their jobs away. What else? What was the question? This tension, right? So about the tension, on social media, it was highlighted. Some of the local community people posted hate speech on the social media. I have a picture. One research assistant, Siam Khan, he actually shared a picture where we have seen outside of a mosque, it was written, "We are not allowing Rohingyas." And it was a cross mark after writing Rohingya, circle plus cross mark. So it was there as a placard in front of a mosque saying that we are not allowing Rohingyas. During this COVID time, we have seen that. So it tells quite a lot about how the local community is perceiving the refugees. A number of things can be said here, particularly, during COVID time, when government was disclosing data of infection, one of the things was said that 78 or 77% of infected people are the migrant workers because they live in a congested place. And if one person is infected, it infects many because they live together. So this type of news was there on the newspaper that actually triggered quite a big panic, I would say. And that also influenced people to see, people already have some negative idea about refugees, that they are dirty, they bring germs and things like that. On top of it, it was Corona time, and the report is saying that 77% infected people are these foreign workers. So quickly they, connect it with the refugees, and their treatment to those people was severe. In some cases, refugees had to leave the house that they were renting. In most of the cases, they rent a house together and share the rent among themselves. They had to leave those housings and had to look for another places. So during COVID time, lots of displacement happened. As they are an invisible community, they are always on move. They cannot settle down, or where they would settle down for certain time depends on where they get some job to earn money. If there is no job, they have to leave. So we know number of families. We know one family from the Langkawi Island. He was surviving, he was managing. He's a father of a small boy. His wife recently passed away. He had to move from Kedah Island to Kuala Lumpur looking for job. So this is just one example, but lots of displacement happened. Refugees had to move from one place to another because they face challenges like this within such scenario. Did I answer the question?
Professor, there's another question from Dr. Shemal also. So you mentioned that there's a movement towards religiosity within the Rohingyas refugees or within Malaysia as a coping mechanism. But did you also observe or see any individuals citing loss of faith or disappointment with the religion due to their suffering?
No, in our findings, our data, I have not found any refugee who would say that I lost of faith, for example. But things are changing for refugees. For example, adapting to the local culture. I have noticed, particularly among women, they are slowly losing their traditional dresses and they are adapting to the local customs and local things. So they started putting on tudong, which is the head cover Malaysian people usually use. So we have seen a transition from losing cultural aspects and adapting to other things, but not to lose focus that Malaysia is also a Muslim majority country. These refugees find certain freedom being in a Muslim country. Before COVID, they were allowed to go to mosque. They were allowed to worship freely. Things like this are quite rare, particularly when they were in Malaysia. Their movement was restricted. Their practice of religion was very much restricted in their home country. So those sort of things they really enjoyed initially, but there are many other challenges as well. So there could be a case, we don't know. In our findings, our data doesn't support to argue along that line. Rather, we found that refugees become much more religious in a sense that they find shelter in those certain type of acts, religious acts. They started paying attention to the meaning. They even paying attention to the call of azan. What they are reading is not just reading. They are trying to understand and trying to find solace within what they have. Their means are very limited, but within this, they are trying to cope. They are trying to find a meaning of their life. They are the survivors of genocide. They actually have lots of pain in their heart. They are constantly remembering those things, those memories of losing meaningful relationship that they have still haunt them, as I shared with you. In those songs that you have seen, that those meaningful relations are gone, and most of these refugees are very lonely, and their families are in many cases not with them. They are in Malaysia to earn and send the money to their families. Those who are with their families, they don't want to leave their family to go somewhere in a plantation area far away, leaving behind their family. So that is one of the reasons those small pilot project was not successful. So I hope I answered.
All right, Professor. So we have another question from Hadil. She's asking about on whether if the government, if the government treated all the refugees the same, would that help in reducing the suffering of the Rohingya, or it is مثلا a societal issue? And if it is a societal issue, how could the government, or what could the government do to raise tolerance, to reduce the tensions between the Malaysian locals and the Rohingya refugees?
Okay, thank you very much, Hadil. Government can do many things, but we also need to understand that Malaysian politics is recently going through lots of turmoil. Their government is falling within very short time of short period of time. That also has an impact, and plus this is Corona time. So currently the government is very busy taking care of themselves. And when it comes to the refugees things, we don't hear much discussion when it comes to refugees in the country, particularly in current time. But if I take your point that if all the refugees are treated equally, Well, first and foremost, there has to be a certain kind of mechanism. There has to be a certain kind of legal framework to treat refugees, accept that these are refugees. Malaysian government is not even accepting them as refugees. You see, Malaysia has not signed the Refugee Convention or its protocol. It's not accepting the refugees as refugees. These are illegal immigrants. So how do you treat illegal immigrants? It's up to the government. So not all illegal immigrants are treated similarly. Whether they would be treating at one point, we hope so. Malaysia is the only country in Southeast Asia that has been very vocal when the genocide was going on. Malaysian former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, he talked about the Rohingya refugees and the genocide that is taking place against them. He criticized, condemned Myanmar in the UN General Assembly. We do not see such thing from other Southeast Asian countries, although other countries are also affected by this refugee flow. So far, Malaysia has been giving them shelter, and Malaysian leaders have been supportive. They send aids to Myanmar to support people during the Corona time, and they send aid to the Rakhine state. And the understanding was that it will get, the aid will get to all types of people, not only the Rohingyas, it will also go to the Rakhine community and things like that. But Malaysia had to give the aid to Myanmar authority to distribute. They are not the one to distribute. So far, government has been supportive, government has been tolerating the refugees, but when it comes to legal framework, we see there is no such thing. So we very much hope that Malaysian government at one point would take these things seriously once their own things are settled down. Right now, Malaysia is going through lots of tough time, particularly having a stable government is a very big issue.
All right, Professor. So now we have a question from Sharifa. She's asking about whether if there is any actions that the country took to limit, the discrimination towards the Rohingya refugees.
Well, I think I said similar things to answer this question. When it comes to states' attempts, we do not see any serious attempts taken by the state to manage this sort of tension, particularly towards the Rohingya refugees. When it comes to the local, the social media and its outrage, hate speech and things, a number of organizations, local organizations inside Malaysia, they actually highlighted these things, and even Human Rights Watch also issued a letter towards the Prime Minister. After that, things were taken seriously, I would say. And then we do not see such thing right now on the social platform where they are directly attacking the Rohingya refugees. So I believe the state is taking care of it as there are international pressure. Non-governmental organizations' role is very important in this case, as they see that, as the government is saying that non-governmental organizations and international organizations, human rights organizations are highlighting these things. The country would like to keep its image, and they work along that line. We have seen that the social media hate speech spreading has stopped to some extent. But to eliminate these things from people's mind, more attempts are needed, as I was highlighting. And we hope that government would work on that.
All right, Professor. So now we have two girls that want to speak. First, Sumaya. Just a second. Okay. Go ahead, please, Sumaya. You could just unmute your mic and start speaking, please. Sumaya, are you there? Okay, so we move to Muna. Mona, please unmute your mic and please start speaking.
Yeah, hi. Hello.
Hello,
Yes,
Mona,
we can
we
hear
can
you.
hear you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hi, doctor. So my first question is that, you know, now in Myanmar, there is a military coup is happening now. They want Myanmar to be a democratic country. So, doctor, do you think that Myanmar could be a democratic country? And my second question is that, do you hope that Myanmar, the Rohingyas can go back to Myanmar if it became a democratic country?
Okay. Thank you, Mona. Thank you for your questions. Well, yes, Myanmar is going through a tragic time. It's really a tragedy that the country fall into the military hands again. Whether it would go back to the democracy is something, as you can see, the people of Myanmar is asking for. They have been protesting is last 13, 14 days. They are protesting. This sort of protest we have not seen in generations in Myanmar. So tremendous things happening. People are on road. In major cities, people are outside asking for this military to get down and restore democracy. Whether it will be soon, it's difficult to say, but we can see that it's not gonna happen very easily. And we started to notice that recently the military has started to crack down on the civilian. They have been using water cannon, rubber bullet. I think yesterday 2 protesters died. They shoot the protesters. So they started taking resort to violence. That is the most scary part. And you see the military is very unpopular in Myanmar right now. And they want to hold on. They calculated before coming. They know which major power is supporting them. Russia and China are supporting them. So it's a very calculative decision for the military, but people, the ordinary citizens, they are asking for democracy, and we are quite scared to see more violence that might be coming. So we have to wait and see. Our hope that it would not bring more violence in Myanmar and take more ordinary people's life. If democracy is restored, whether these refugees, Rohingya particularly, can go back. When we talk to the refugees, they have hope. They still have hope within this hopelessness situation. They still hope that one day Myanmar would be a peaceful place where they would be accepted and they can go back to their country. But it's highly unlikely that this will happen anytime soon, given the scenario and situation we see in Myanmar. We have seen while democracy was there in the last, it was not pure democracy, it was quasi-democracy, looked like democracy, but behind actually the military was holding on to major powers. Many of the ministers were actually military power. And that is why probably democracy did not flourish, and ultimately it now upside down in the case of Myanmar. So whether democracy will take the refugees back, the Rohingyas back, it is a hope of the Rohingya children of Myanmar, because they belong there. You have seen how they express their belongingness in their about their homeland. Their belongingness is still there. They're crying for their motherland, Arakan. So people are still hopeful, and we should be hopeful, and we should not give up. And the academicians, we are trying our best to bring the Rohingya voice and also bring alternative point of view to tell that no matter what the Myanmar government is saying, what the Malaysian government is saying, people still have dignity. People are still fighting for their rights, and we will be working on it.
All right, Professor. So now we will move to Dr. Sherko. I think Dr. Sherko has a question.
Yeah, my first question is technical. I don't know how to raise my hand.
So I think that the panelists cannot raise their hands because they have the mic.
So they can just talk as time they want.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Farzana, thank you very much for this informative and thought-provoking and sometimes emotional, really emotional for me because I'm a refugee. I was a refugee and I know the suffering of refugees. So my question is that the refugees, the Rohingya refugees in Malaysia, are they politically active in Malaysia in two ways? Whether they organizing any lobby groups to to towards the Malaysian government to gain a better status, to gain refugee status, or in support of the resistance groups in Rohingya, in Myanmar. So politically, are they active in both ways?
Thank you, Dr. Sherko, for these questions. In terms of lobby, all those community organizations that I have highlighted, Rohingya Women Development Society and Rohingya Society in Malaysia, RSM, these organizations are constantly trying to lobby the ministers and Malaysian authority to bring a better life for the refugees. So particularly those two organizations that are approved or recognized by the UNHCR, time to time, they will have a dialogue. They will be invited to have a discussion. If ministers would like to know about the community, these are the two institutions, among other community-based organizations, to know about the community, to communicate with the community. So they have been lobbying for a better life in Malaysia. But their means are very limited. They need to really work hard to bring their case on the table. And because there are many other challenges, there are other organizations who are also trying. And Rohingya refugees are not the only Rohingya refugee community in Malaysia. Other Rohingya, other refugee community like the Shan refugee community from Myanmar, the Karenni refugee community from Myanmar, the Chin refugee community from Myanmar, they also have their community-based organizations. So all these community-based organizations are fighting for their benefit. They are trying their best. So within this, being a stateless community, fighting for their rights, the Rohingyas are trying their best. They are working on it. So on lobby, I would say this much. Is there any resistance group, political activities in Malaysia? Malaysian government is very strict about it. They are constantly monitoring if there is anything like this. There was certain allegations that the ARSA group, one particular resistance group based in Arakan of Myanmar, that had the conflict with the police authority in 2017 that initiate the crackdown in 2017 August. There was certain allegations that refugees are somehow supporting our ARSA resistance group in Malaysia, in Myanmar, but from our data, we do not really have strong evidence to talk about it, that how this is happening, or whether refugees are really doing these things. But when we talk to the refugees, they have a fighting spirit within them, definitely. So that resistance feeling is within there among the refugees. But whether any active political groups in Malaysia, we doubt, because the authority, through its different actions, ensures that the refugees are not settling down in one place because they are not living in camps, because they are scattered within the local community. So situation drives them to move from one place to another place, doesn't allow them to settle down and do grouping and things. Although having said that, there are one or two locations where, for example, one particular bazaar in Kuala Lumpur, I forgot the exact name, there are allegations that this area is constantly becoming a refugee area. They are dominating in that area, and these are Rohingya refugees. But when we visited, our findings suggest that it's only not Rohingya refugees. Other refugees are also involved in that particular area doing different businesses. But that is something government doesn't like. Government doesn't like to see that any refugee community is settling down and creating a situation that looks like permanent. So actually, we are not aware of any political activities that is going on. I do not have data to talk about it. Thank you.
All right, Professor. Thank you. So, do we have any other speakers? Anyone that wants to ask a question? Please raise your hand if you want.
Okay. You can wrap it up, Salim.
Okay, so now Riman will conclude, if she's here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
So thank you all for asking. And I'm so glad that we had a lot of contribution today, far more than our first. I guess we're slowly stepping into the, coming back to the energy, and people are starting to get more excited. And I think that this was an amazing start, because this topic is so insightful, and even though it's such a unique experience, a lot of people can actually understand what not necessarily resonate with it, unlike some specific groups can resonate with it, but a lot of people can understand or empathize with what's happening. So I think it's very important to discuss it. And I'm so glad that we got the opportunities to sit down and share ideas today. So thank you all for attending. And thank you, Dr. Farzana, for this extremely insightful speech.
Thank you, Riman. And thanks a lot to all of you for your time and your support. And I hope that this sort of event will take place in future, because we know about these refugees through media, but actually we do not know their condition. We do not know them very well. So more research are needed on the Rohingya community, and I hope that it will encourage our students to work on different refugee communities and share in platforms like this. So thank you so much to all of you.
Have a good night, everybody, or evening. Sorry. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.